Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again for another session of Through My Eyes with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, the program where we listen to the Prof share his views on various international events, and you also get to contribute and ask him questions through our online portals. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Share the link, invite your friends. It's going to be an exciting time this evening. Prof, thank you once again for joining us this evening. Do you have any opening remarks for our viewers?
Well, shalom, salam, peace, alafia. Uh, Given the issues that I suspect you are going to raise with me this evening, I pray for peace.
Thank you for that, Prof. Thank you for that. And you are right. There's some interesting developments across many nations that we would be putting to you this evening. But also to our viewers, please feel free to comment, put your questions in the different chat windows, and I will pass those across to Prof. So, Prof, we continue to see the unprecedented events unfolding in the US. President Trump has become the only president of the United States to be impeached twice. Democrats have called him a clear and present danger. What is your view on the situation evolving in the United States, Prof?
Um, I suspected that this issue was going to be raised, and it doesn't make for a happy response from me. Once the election was held in November 3rd, I believe, our very first session after that, I predicted there was going to be violence on the streets of the United States, and that this was my biggest fear, and that I hope it won't happen. Some of the people got in touch with me privately because they had access to me, thought I was exaggerating. Um, and I told them that I pray that I will be exaggerating, that more than that, I pray that I will be wrong, because the impact of events in the United States on the rest of the world can only be imagined. Unfortunately, I've been proven right. It doesn't make me happy. It makes me quite sad that what we are witnessing in the United States could be happening. Number two, that what we are witnessing in the United States may be the beginning of a much larger event that may take years before it fades out, if it ever does. And that in the interval between now and when it fades out, um, even the enemies of the United States will not have predicted and will not have wished on the United States what we are likely to see happen. Now, we have a saying in this part of the world that if people are deceiving you, don't deceive yourself. As I follow the events in the United States, even though the Americans are in a state of shock over what happened at the Capitol, I am not sure that the Americans have come to a realization of what is still to happen and what the ramifications are. Recall that last week I said something in answer to one of your questions. I said, look, I don't want to subscribe into conspiracy theories. Trump has made the concept of conspiracy theory is given it such a bad name that even scholars like me uh, will feel very, very edgy about now using that concept uh, uh, in order to explain events in the United States. But given what we now know about collusion between security elements and the insurrectionists, I think everybody by now will admit that there was a that what happened at the Capitol is the tip of a conspiracy in the United States. The one that people are not focusing on is conspiracy at the very top of the security forces. Um, uh, I am not an expert in what we will call security analysis or threat analysis. Yes, I'm familiar with them. I use them in doing whatever analysis that I am doing. But now, even Americans who deal with the social media, one of them that I'm very familiar with, as far back as middle of December, had raised an alarm that what is picking up from the social chart shows that there is something big about to happen in Washington. And as I said last week, even Trump didn't hide it. On his Twitter, he said, come to Washington on January 6th. Things are going to be happening in Congress. I'm asking you to turn up. And when ordinary people who have a versatility with social media, chat room, have been raising alarm, Pentagon didn't pick this up. Is that what they're telling us? FBI didn't pick this up. Is that what they are telling us? The security service did not pick this up. Is that what they are telling us? No, 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 no. Come on. I think there is conspiracy at the very top. And I pray because the safety of Biden, Harris, and the incoming administration, even the Speaker of the House, their safety is in the hands of all these people who are sitting on top of these organizations, who turned a blind eye to what was being planned, which wasn't hidden. I hope and I pray for them, because even up till now, if you do a public opinion poll in the United States, I am not sure what's the percentage of Americans who believe that the assassination of John F. Kennedy was just the action of one man. I hope, I hope that the incoming administration is going to be secure and is going to be stable. But I think there is going to be need for clearing out at the very top of most of the people who are in charge of these security organizations. Now, what have we been told? That people are planning events in the same capital and also in the 50 state capitals. They see, and this is why I said we've just seen the beginning, how far this will go. They feel so confident that they are planning all over the insurrection all over the United States. When will America itself wake up and deal with its gun laws? When? They say, oh, well, the right to carry arms and ammunition is an American right. Nobody can touch it. Well, when it leads to insurrection in the whole of the United States, and people are, in fact, do you know, I have even been wrong on this program. What happened in Washington at the Capitol may have been the first one in Washington. But last year, there was one in Michigan State Capitol, where they entered the chambers with guns, carrying guns, edged on by this same Trump over lockdown to cope with COVID-19. They went into the state capitol in Michigan, and nothing happened to the people who did that. They were not arrested, and it was business as usual. Now, the chicken had come home to roost. So, yeah, I'm not, one hates to be a harbinger of bad news, but really, the way things are going, I think we are in for a rough ride.
Yeah, Prof. Before I go to the point on the impeachment, since you've raised the question about security and the National Guards, um, what this week we've seen the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They've released a statement reminding service personnel that they took an oath to the Constitution of the United States. And we are also seeing that we have some guards that have been staying within the building of Capitol to protect it, to stop this kind of thing from happening again. And only yesterday, these National Guards are being issued firearms. Um, where do you see this going, Prof? If we were to have the kind of uprising we had earlier on in the year, and now we have National Guards with guns, where do you see that going, Prof?
Well, it doesn't give me confidence. What doesn't give me confidence is what you haven't mentioned. And that is the fact that we now know that among the insurrectionists who invaded Congress halls were actual members of the security forces. The Secret Service has been mentioned, National Guard has been mentioned, police force, members of the police force have been mentioned, not from Washington, D.C., from other states. But the important thing is, how do I know, how do you know that these same guardsmen who have been armed in order to protect Congress, that there are not some of them who have bought into the lunacy of Donald Trump? How do we know? We don't know. Do you recall that the people, the military men who killed Indira Gandhi were actually part of her bodyguards? They were not outsiders. So how do we know? The lack of confidence in the instruments that are supposed to provide this security, this protection. That all you need is one lone wolf amongst them. And you've made reference to the statement by all the service chiefs in the United States.
Yes.
I recall that right after the election, the chairman of the Joint Services Chiefs issued a statement making that same point, that our loyalty is to the Constitution, not to an individual. You will also recall that 2 weeks ago or thereabouts, all the surviving defense secretaries put an op-ed in, I don't know whether it was the Washington Post or New York Times, making exactly the same point. And now all the service chiefs have just signed that letter. Is that something they know that we don't know? Has there been an attempt surreptitiously to intervene in the operations of the American armed forces, or to subvert the American armed forces? And that this is why all these public interventions are taking place. These are dangerous times, not only for the United States, but for the rest of the world as well.
Hmm. Thank you, Prof. Let's move to the impeachment of President Trump itself. Um, some have referred to this as a toothless move. It's so late in the day; he's going to be gone in less than a week from now. What is the point of starting such a resolution? Do you agree with that view, Prof?
No, I don't. I don't at all. The reason being that, what did Shakespeare say? The evil that men do, live after them, is the good that is interred with their bones. For the rest of his life, and even after his death, Trump is going to go down as the only American president who has been impeached twice. When you bear in mind that up until Trump, only two American presidents had been impeached, only two. And now he has doubled that number. It's going to be taught in all American history classes. That's number one. Number two is the reason for the second impeachment, aiding and abetting insurrection. I mean, that's a treasonable offense in probably a lot of countries in the world. He will have been executed for that. But the President of the United States, you can't do that. Thirdly, you don't know what is going to happen when he gets tried by the Senate. Again, the only American president to face trial twice by the Senate. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of the second trial in the Senate. I myself don't believe you are going to get the 17 Republican votes that you will need to join the Democrats, assuming all the Democrats vote the same way. I don't think you'll get the 17 Republican votes to get a conviction. Because, I mean, I'm still amazed that 174 Republicans voted against impeachment in the House during the vote on impeachment. These were people who were in Congress, whose lives were at stake. People in the insurrectionists went there with the intention of either arresting or kidnapping or hanging members. And these people were there. The life of their vice president, Mike Pence, was in jeopardy. They were calling out for him by name. And yet, these people still voted against impeachment. It shows the depth of the rot that had gone into the Republican Party. It has even been suggested openly that there were some members of Congress who took some of the insurrectionists on tour of the layout of Congress the day before the insurrection or the attempted insurrection took place. Some members of Congress. So, but if all you got was just the impeachment of Trump, I don't think it's wasted effort. I think the name Trump, probably for the next 100 years, is going to be a name people will try to avoid associating with.
Hmm. All right. Thank you for that, Prof. There is a point before we leave the questions on the US that I would also like to get your views on, and it's this issue of the Trump administration lighting quite a lot of foreign policy fires for President-elect Joe Biden and his team. What are your views on that? So, Cuba, they've named Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. They've also highlighted the rebel groups in Yemen as a foreign terrorist organization. And then we've got the issue around the relations between US officials and Taiwanese officials, which China is obviously reacting to. What are your views on these fires that people are talking about now?
Well, I think that I label all of these irritants, in the sense that they are policy declarations that President Biden could reverse by declarations again. These were not congressional laws. Um, uh, as you rightly said, naming Cuba exporter of terrorism is laughable. Nobody believes that. The problem in Yemen with the Hutu um, 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 it's part of Trump's relationship with Saudi Arabia. Again, it's the kind of thing you could reverse. The one of China is not even problematic. Several American presidents, Republican and Democrats, have worked out with China itself this wink and nod diplomacy over Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan is there. Yes, China claims it's a province of China. Fine. America has this moderated relationship with Taiwan. China looks the other way, provided that red line that both the United States and China have agreed to is not crossed by either of them. Now, unilaterally, Trump had crossed it within 1 week of his leaving office. It's not going to create a problem for Biden to simply reverse that and go back to where that red line was. And China will understand that uh, that moving the red line by Trump was not a fundamental decision by the United States. The one that's going to provide a problem has to do with Israel, and it's not the Abraham Accords. Two issues. One is the movement of the capital, or the recognition of the movement of the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. And two, labeling of goods made by Israeli settlers on Palestinian territories as goods made in Israel, and thereby giving it entry into the United States under favorable conditions. Those will prove problematic because of the Israeli lobby in the United States. And in any case, since that involves especially the movement of the capital, you can't start flip-flopping. You move your embassy to one place today, 2 years later, you move your embassy back to another place. Where who says that, in 4 years' time, they are not going? So that the Biden administration is going to have to walk a clever line on that issue of Jerusalem as the capital. But all the others, I just regard them as irritants that Biden should be able to handle without much difficulty.
All right, Prof, let's move the conversation to Africa, where we have, let's go to Uganda. Uganda is also going through elections, and there has been quite a bit of violence over the last few days. President Museveni been ruling since 1986. He's been accused of changing laws to support himself staying in power much longer and even maybe even indefinitely. And Prof, there are two questions I want to put to you this evening. The first one is the issue around electoral reforms, and why is it that sometimes in African countries we find it easy to change the laws and get leaders to stay on indefinitely? What kind of safeguards do we need to have in place to stop this kind of things happening in Africa? Let's deal with that question first, and then we'll come to another one.
Well, it's a weakness of the party system. Uh, People cross carpet uh, quite easily in Africa. For those who may not understand the use of that word, it means people who are elected on party A will then cross the carpet to party B once they see that the party B, the president belongs to party B and is the president. Even if the president, doesn't, they will still cross over simply because not only is it the weakness of the party system, but it is the poverty embedded in our politics. People in Africa don't play politics of principles. They play the politics of what they can get, what the benefit to them from aligning themselves with the governing party, the man in power. And of course, thirdly, and here we don't, it's not an African disease. We've seen it in the United States now. How many Republicans are so scared of Trump, they will not even stand up to him, even when their lives have been in danger from an insurrection midwifed by Trump. In African countries, in a lot of African countries, maybe not all, the presidents are not paragons of decency. They are not paragons of obedience to law. And they don't shy away from measures that could jeopardize the lives of political opponents. Unlike the United States, where at least the instruments of state in the judiciary and in Congress have measures of integrity and independence. In Africa, I'm afraid, um, institutions suffer from a deficit of integrity, obedience to law, obedience to uh, judgments of court. Look at what happened to the wife of the main presidential opposition leader yesterday in Uganda. She was practically stripped naked in the presence of her son by the police. or because the police are under the control of Museveni. Um, Uganda has been very unfortunate uh, because first she suffered under Idi Amin, and now she's suffering under Museveni. I don't think Museveni has ever won any decent election in Uganda. In a way, okay, he was a freedom fighter, a guerrilla fighter who led his troops from the bush into Kampala, the capital, seized power there, and has held on to power since then by continuing to move the goalposts and by continuing to terrorize Ugandans by the Ugandan police and the Ugandan army. So these are the various reasons why it's been so easy for some African heads of states to hang on, to move the goalposts, to abuse their control of their parliament in order to shift those goalposts. But at the same time, let us praise those African countries, many of them who have embraced not only the law, but the spirit of democracy. Several have done so.
Prof, let me ask another question here regarding Uganda, because some have talked about the continued support from countries like the United States, the aid that goes to countries like Uganda, and that in fact, having Museveni there as long as he has may be in the interest of some of these foreign governments. What's your take on that?
Whenever an African or third world leader abuses the tenets of democracy, the tenets of freedom, and gets away with it, behind him is usually a foreign power whose interests are involved. So I don't think Museveni would have gotten away with this for so long without the backing of the United States. There was a time, I don't know whether they are still there, there was a time when the United States special forces were in northern part of Uganda because they were going after insurrectionists. We are back to the use of that word again. Insurrectionists in the northern part of Uganda, and they were supposed to be helping Museveni to cope with that. There are probably other reasons why they were there. Um, so you are quite right that Museveni's survivor uh, has probably been embedded by the assistance of the United States.
All right, Prof. Let's move on to um, another evolving story, and that's the one between Ethiopia and Sudan and the rising tensions there. One that some have even looked at as as a tri-state problem, where you've got Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, in this sort of challenge around building a dam on the Nile, the blue Nile. And one of the challenges we've seen, Prof, is that Sudan in the last few weeks has been in the press quite a lot. One was the agreement they signed with Russia to have some military base there. Then last week we had about them signing the Abrahamic Accord and the U.S. making about $1.3 billion available to address some of the debt they owe as a nation. And then now we're hearing of a buildup of forces along the border with Ethiopia. Is Sudan starting to be a superpower of sorts in that region?
No, I think the concept of being a superpower is not applicable in my judgment. Um, there are so many issues which are coming together. Sudan has its own problem, its own domestic problems, which have still not been resolved following the civilian coup, civilian insurrection, or whatever you might have, that led to uh, the installation of an interim government made up of really parties with conflicting interests and just hanging together by a thread. That's one internal problem. Whenever they decide to have elections, probably these internal contradictions are going to emerge. So that is there. Then the the problem in Ethiopia in Tigray province, which has led to people fleeing into exile uh, in Sudan. Perhaps, creating a destabilizing presence that is there. And then, of course, there is the issue of the dam in Ethiopia that you have mentioned. So, I mean, those will be enough on the plate of any nation without bringing in the Abraham Accords or the the writing off of the debt by the United States. I think that Sudan, the Sudanese leaders find themselves in a very tight spot in terms of foreign policy objectives. And they've been trying to see which iron they could put in the fire to sustain them. And that's why they've run into Israel, they've run to the United States, they've run into Russia. I think it's more an indication of problem by the Sudanese leaders in assessing how best to handle the issues they are faced with. One will just not be able to pull out one iron. There are just several, and they don't know which one will work. I mean, Trump is on his way out. How is Biden going to assess what is going to happen? And if Egypt decides to launch an attack on Ethiopia over that dam, Is Sudan going to sign on to that kind of military act? The assessment of the power differential between Sudan and Ethiopia. I don't think Sudan alone can take on Ethiopia, but Sudan plus Egypt can probably take on Ethiopia.
But do you see even Ethiopia being able, given its own internal problems, do you see Ethiopia being able to engage in any kind of full-scale war with Sudan?
Yeah, I believe that Ethiopia has a very powerful armed forces. The skirmish in Tigray, I don't think will have dented the military capability of Ethiopia. Uh, don't forget that, in fact, Sudan is the weak partner in this because they have also gone through a horrendous civil war, um, first with Southern Sudan, and now the problem internally following the revolution that overthrew their former president and the fragility of the national government. I think, but there's no doubt in my mind that Sudan will not get itself engaged in a military confrontation with Ethiopia without an alliance or without a wink and a nod from Egypt.
Prof, there's a question on YouTube here that I want to pass to you, and it's in relation to a comment you made earlier when you were talking about the United States and the fact that the gun laws in the United States had made it easy to have the insurrectionists with the weapons and the ammunition that they have. And the point someone is making here is that, well, there is no constitutional right to bear arms in some African nations, yet those nations are under siege from all sorts of armed groups, and therefore the removal or the refining of the gun laws in the United States, it's not likely to have made any difference at all.
I don't think we're talking about the same thing. Movements in Africa, and I agree with the questioner that Africa is awash with weapons by various dissident movements and different dissident groups. But behind these dissident groups are foreign forces. I don't believe that there is any dissident armed movement in Africa that has access to weapons based on its own capability to source for those weapons. Where does it get the money to buy the weapons? Supplier of weapons are not into charity. Whereas in the United States, because of the right to bear arms, guns are so cheap, they are so widespread. In a lot of places, all you need is your license, possession of a driver's license, and you can walk in and buy a gun. In some places, they will check your identity. Some have laws that call for some some element of time between paying for the weapons and the weapons being sold to you while they conduct a background check. But in Africa, it's an act of illegality, but aided and abetted by foreign forces.
Uh, Prof, there's a question that's coming in again on one of the channels here, but this relates to the United States. And that's the fact that the Congress has gone obviously for Trump as the first one they're picking in terms of impeachment. But the question here is that Trump was not the only actor there that publicly incited the people. Should Congress also now start to go after those people actively, like they have done with Trump?
There's a role for Congress in dealing with its own members. Obviously, Republicans who also aided and abetted the insurrectionists by the speeches they made, not on the floor of Congress, but outside at that rally. You have some senators who went there to speak. You have some members of the House of Rep who went out there to speak. You have people who put incendiary messages on Twitter. I believe that Congress, frankly, should expel them. You know, there are laws in the United States dating back to the Civil War. After the Civil War, there were some Americans from the South who tried to get back into Congress. And Congress passed a law that if you have been involved in insurrection, either aiding, abetting, or carrying guns against constituted authority in the United States, you are not qualified to be a member of Congress. That law is there. They don't need to make any law. And I think that law will be sufficient for Congress to expel those of its members who are involved not in just making speeches, because you have to be careful about trampling on the right to free speech. Even though the American Supreme Court had ruled that the right to free speech is not absolute. That is what is called the what is it called now? It's not cinema. It's something close to it. But you cannot go into a cinema house and shout fire, knowing fully well that in the stampede that will follow, the lives of people are going to be at risk. You don't have that right. It's not covered by the First Amendment. So it's going, in this particular case also, to make a speech inciting people to insurrection will not be covered by the right to free speech. That's number one. Number two, the Secret Service, the FBI, Department of Justice, all have you, should go after people like Giuliani, people like the son of President Trump, the lawyers who made those incendiary speeches at that rally, from where people then went on to attack Congress. They should go after them. It should be a uprooting Because, as I said, America is in great danger. They may not be aware of this, although I suspect they are aware, but there are just so many of Trump supporters now in very sensitive positions in the United States that they may just want to go after a few people and leave the rest alone. I think they will be making a mistake leaving the rest alone.
Prof, we've got 2 minutes to go before the end of the program today, and I want to ask a question on that last point you made. Would you expect President-elect Biden, once he becomes president, to start to clear out the Trump loyalists in these sensitive positions?
Yes, I will advise him to do so, but within the law. People who are civil servants, public servants, just doing their job, they should be protected. Um, a lot of them were victimized by Trump, and instead, his own people were put there. It is his own people who should be weeded out. The law allows every American to hold views. Obviously, if you're a public servant, you couldn't canvass those views. Those views are known to you, maybe your wife and your children, and it translates into you voting privately, secretly, but not allowing your views to interfere in the performance of your official duties. I think those who have allowed that to happen should be weeded out for the safety of the administration and for the safety of the republic, and as a warning to others that your job will be at stake and your liberty may be at stake if you allow your personal political views to jeopardize the republic by supporting insurrection.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this evening. Bang on time. Thank you so much for those insightful views. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next week. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, Instagram, like the page. So next time when we go live, you will get the notification on the program. But thank you for joining us this evening. Prof, any last words before we go?
Now, just to join you in thanking those who have stayed on with us. I hope they've enjoyed the contribution. And if they have any disagreement with anything that I have said, I will look forward next week to taking your views and appreciating them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. And bye to our viewers. See you same time next week.